on a dark desert highway. Hello, Wonderhussy here. Today I'm going on an adventure right in my own backyard. I live right off what's called the Old Spanish Trail Highway, which is a highway that doesn't really go anywhere anymore. This lonely desert road starts at Nevada Highway 160, which is the highway from Las Vegas to Pahrump, and passes through an exceptionally desolate part of the Mojave Desert all the way to California Highway 127, which is the road from Baker to Shoshone. It's kind of a forgotten, lonely byway that crosses the state line from Nevada to California with very little in the way of development the entire way. It's mostly used by the few people who live in the tiny settlement of Tecopa, or people going out to the hot springs there, and RVers from Las Vegas hauling their ATVs out to the Dumont sand dunes for the weekend. Between the toy hauler traffic and the fact that, being so remote, it gets no love from Caltrans, it's in pretty rough shape, with lots of potholes. It's a pretty sketchy highway to drive, but it has a great name. So why is it called that? Well, way before any Europeans arrived in North America, the native peoples living in the interior of the country were trading goods with native peoples that were living on the coast. And they established a route by which they could travel over the mountains and across the deserts with the least amount of hassle. They figured out the easiest passes through the mountains and where all the water sources were in the deserts. Then, when the Spanish came over and established their capital in Santa Fe, in what's today called New Mexico, well, they also wanted to trade with the settlements on the coast because the Spaniards had also established a little colony out there by the name of Los Angeles, and they wanted to trade woven textiles and blankets from New Mexico for horses and mules in California. So, of course, they asked, or possibly forced, the local Native Americans into telling them the secrets of the route they'd figured out. And beginning in 1829, the Spanish began traveling west out of Santa Fe, following the old Indian routes through the mountains of Colorado and the canyons of Utah, across the deserts of Arizona, Nevada, and California, all the way to the Pacific coast and the tiny settlement of Los Angeles. This was no easy journey. I mean, if you look at a map, you can see that they had to cross through some very rugged and inhospitable terrain. And crossing the deserts was particularly tough because water was so scarce. I mean, not only did they need a daily water source to stay alive themselves, they also needed water and grass to feed the mules who were carrying these hundreds of pounds of blankets. And so it was vitally important to know about every spring and water source along the way, ideally within a day's walking distance, which was about 12 to 15 miles. Well, if you've ever been to the desert, especially the desert outside Death Valley, you know there's not that much water out here. But the Native Americans had figured out a route that could get you through the desert to the coast, alive, barely. But since it was pretty much the only way to get to Los Angeles, the Spanish continued using this trail for years. And then when Mexico declared its independence, the Mexicans continued to use it until they signed the Treaty of Guadalupe de Hidalgo, giving control of all this land to the United States in 1848. And once the U.S. controlled the land, settlers like the Mormons continued to use the trail to cross the desert from Utah to the coast until eventually the railroads and then finally the highways were built, rendering the old Spanish Trail obsolete. Now, because the Spanish Trail passed through so many desolate and inhospitable areas, a lot of it is still undeveloped to this day, and you can still travel along parts of it. So that's just what I'm gonna do. I want to experience what one day on the old Spanish Trail would have been like, so I'm gonna walk from one watering hole to the next, just like they would have done back in the 1830s and 1840s. I'm gonna start way back here in Nevada at a place called Stump Spring and walk all the way to the next watering hole, which is Resting Spring, in California. It's going to be about a 24-mile walk, which is a long day, but still just one day out of the 90 days it would have taken the Spanish to get all the way from Santa Fe to Los Angeles. Okay, wow. I've passed by this signboard so many times without stopping to read it, and it's fascinating. Look how cool this is. They have a map and a little bit of history all about the old Spanish Trail from 1829 to 1848, right here at Stump Spring. Or somewhere in the vicinity of Stump Spring anyway. I need to drive around and try to find the actual location where Stump Spring used to be. That's right, I said used to be. According to the sign, Stump Spring, now dry, is located in a gully. With the lowering of the water table for modern urban and agricultural use in the Pahrump Valley, the vegetation that once flourished here is now gone, but it says the large size of the stumps and trunks of trees confirms the existence of more water in the past. So basically, according to this sign, I guess this was never really that reliable of a spring to begin with. I mean, I think the Spanish called it something like agua escarbada, I think, which means water that you have to dig for. It wasn't a beautiful, flowing, bubbling, crystal clear spring like you see over in Ash Meadows. It was a muddy little seep that you had to get down and dirty and dig for with your shovel. But it was still life-giving water in the middle of this barren, inhospitable stretch of the trail. Oh yeah, see, look, it says here on the signboard. In 1853, Gwyn Harris Heap called it agua escarbada. Escarbar means to dig or scratch in Spanish. So we assume travelers found water by digging here. And then look, it says people headed east along the trail had to travel 20 miles to Mountain Springs to find the next source of water. Mountain Springs is at the top of the pass when you're driving from Pahrump to Las Vegas. And then it says westbound travelers continued for 24 miles to Resting Springs in California. That'll be me. And it looks like I'll be in good company because it says here, in 1844, John C. Fremont traveled through here, and he reported that the grass was nearly as scarce as water. After a day's march of 24 miles, we reached at evening the bed of a stream from which the water had disappeared. A little only remained in holes, which we increased by digging. Well, I'm not planning to dig for any water, but I am planning to drive out into the desert here and see if I can find the site where Stump Spring used to be. Now, like the sign says, it's now dry because the water table's been sucked down so low, but there should still be these big trunks of trees and stumps, which I guess is how I got the name Stump Spring. So we ought to be able to identify the site where Stump Spring used to be. But before we head off to look for Stump Spring, check this out. It's a marker for the old Spanish Trail. Look at that. 1829 to 1848. That's pretty cool. I don't know how many of those markers there are on the entire route from Santa Fe to Los Angeles, but I think it's really neat that there happens to be one right here. Okay, according to Google Maps, I'm right on top of Stump Spring right now, but golly, it's kind of hard to find a dried up spring. I mean, you can see we're kind of in a gully, and there's a pretty decent amount of vegetation down here for the desert. So that definitely indicates that there's some kind of groundwater in this area, and I suppose before everybody sucked the water table dry, well, you might have just been able to dig up just enough water for you and your 300 mules to get by for the night. I guess maybe this is what the sign meant by the gully, because it definitely looks like it was a waterway at some point in the very distant past. And then look over here. USGS Stream Gauging Station. Far out! So we really did make it to the legendary and life-saving Stump Spring. So this is where I'm gonna start my hike to Resting Springs in California. I guess for now, I should probably find a safe place to park my car while I'm gone. And, well, a nice level spot so I can get a good night's sleep. Because even though it's supposed to get down to 35 degrees tonight, and my cozy bed is only 30 miles away, I decided to camp out at Stump Spring just like the travelers on the old Spanish trail, and set out on foot in the morning. I have a long day's journey ahead of me, so I better hit the sack early and get a good night's sleep. Ooh. Okay, I'm ready to hit the trail. Apologies if I look a little rough. No makeup today because, well, they didn't wear makeup on the old Spanish trail. And for that matter, I'm wearing the same clothes I wore yesterday and the same clothes I slept in because, again, I'm pretty sure they didn't bring pajamas with them. Anyway, the plan is to leave my car parked back here at Stump Spring and then spend all day walking to Resting Spring, where my sister will pick me up, take me back here to pick up my car, and then I'll drive home. Whew. It is chilly out here, and it was cold last night, but I wanted to do this at this time of year because historically, this is the time of year that people would have traveled the old Spanish trail. I think typically they left Santa Fe in like November and got to Los Angeles around the end of January. Well, today's February 7th, so I guess technically I'm a little bit behind schedule, but well, I'm more or less being authentic to the way they would have done it back in the day. Because if you think about it, crossing the desert at any other time would have been unthinkable. I mean, not only would it have been too hot, but the water sources might have been dried up. So you pretty much had to do this in the winter. Ah! Ahoy! Now I really feel like I'm in the olden times because I see in the distance a mission. Okay, I might be getting my trails confused. There was the famous Mission Trail that went up and down the California coast, and that was totally different from the old Spanish Trail. Back in the days that people were traveling the old Spanish Trail, there was nothing out here, including any missions. But there is a mission out here today, and the fact that I can see it, well, it tells me one thing. I'm getting close to the state line, because that mission is right on the California-Nevada boundary. Ah, look at this. We've come to the old Spanish Trail Highway. This is such a desolate highway that, well, I feel pretty confident just walking right down the middle of it, like Forrest Gump, because there's not that many cars passing this way. Hey, but look, we're at the state line. See the sign? Entering Inyo County, California. Woohoo! I've successfully completed the Nevada leg of my trek. Uh-oh. I was wondering how long it would take before I found one of these. It's my bet more, a Mylar balloon. These things get loose and blow around and get stuck in these trees in the desert, in the most remote parts of the desert. I mean, you go into the Death Valley backcountry and you'll find these bad boys. And they take forever to biodegrade, if ever. So, well, it's kind of my personal mission to pick up as many Mylar balloons as I can when I'm out in the backcountry, even when I'm hiking 24 miles in a single day. So I'll put this in my pack and throw it away later, but consider this a PSA. Next time you go to buy balloons, well, consider buying latex instead. See, here's the mission. And it's right on the state line. I think this is actually the state line. And you can tell from the condition of the road. I guess I misspoke earlier when I said this road gets no love from Caltrans. Because as you can very clearly see, the road on the California side of the line is in way better condition than the road on the Nevada side of the line. Woo! NDOT, shame on you. Anyway, yeah, this is the St. Teresa or Santa Teresa Mission, and it's a rest area. And I've actually never stopped here before, but it does look really nice. Unfortunately, I've only gone about 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles, so it's too early on my journey to stop and rest. But I definitely want to come check this place out sometime, because you know what it is? It's actually a columbarium. And what, pray tell, is a columbarium, you might wonder? Well, it's a place where you keep your deceased loved ones' cremains. You know, you store them in little lockers, I guess, and well, just like you would go to the cemetery to visit someone's grave, you go to the columbarium to visit somebody's urn. Now, I don't know why you wouldn't just keep the urn at home, but maybe some people think that's bad juju, so they pay money to keep it out here. And I think this is specifically marketed towards Filipinos from the Los Angeles area. So they get them to come out here and store the loved ones' remains, and gosh, I guess it's just cheaper out here. Even though we're on the California side of the line now. I guess it's way cheaper out here than it would be anywhere else in California. But yeah, that giant Quonset hut there is probably full of ashes. How about that? It's not like any of the missions in the old mission trail in California. I'll tell you that much. Oh, hi, fella. Oh, I remember you. Oh, yes, and you too. Look at this beautiful dog's eyes. I've actually met these dogs before. They live at one of these little homesteads out yonder in the desert here. This is a part of the trail that's now called Charleston View, and it's where there's a lot of off-gridders and homesteaders. I mean, you can see there's a pretty crazy compound going on, and there's a whole bunch of them scattered all over the desert out here. And well, that's part of the reason I decided to walk on the road with my 2 friends for this part of the journey, because, well, some of these off-gridder homesteaders probably wouldn't take too kindly to some YouTubing nitwit trespassing on their private property. You know what I mean? Like, whatever they're hiding behind that fence is none of my business. Or you hear that? The sound of a generator and the dulcet tones of AM talk radio. Never a good combination. So, at least for this part of the trail, I figured it was prudent to just stay on the road. But I don't mean to make it sound creepy out here, because there's actually a lot of really cool people doing some really cool stuff. Like that right over there is a genuine Russian banya. That's right, like a Russian bathhouse where you go in and steam and they beat you with eucalyptus branches. I've been to it and it's really cool. I don't know if you can see, there's a little teepee over there on the left. And then there's a pyramid just to the right of that. And then to the right of that, you might be able to see this weird round blue thing. Well, that's the bathhouse. It's designed to look like a geode, if you know what that is. Like those rocks that when you crack them open, there's like crystals inside. Well, these crazy Russians built this trailer that looks like a geode with cool stained glass windows on one side when you open it up. And there's a bathhouse inside it. Oh, it's wild. It's called the Soul Banya, because you don't just go in there to sweat out your physical toxins. You sweat out your mental and psychological torments as well. Check them out, man. They're on Instagram. Whew. All right, it's 10 a.m. I've gone about 6.25 miles. Still, 17 3/4 to go. Yeah, this is a long day's travel, and well, typically on the old Spanish Trail, they would only go about 15 miles a day. But out here, with water sources being so few and far between, well, there were some pretty long stretches, and this is one of them. I'm expecting this walk to take me about 12 hours, because normally if I walk briskly, I do about 3 miles an hour. but I have to shoot B-roll and keep running back to get my camera, and then I'm fussing with my drone, and well, I'm gonna very generously aim for a 2-mile-an-hour pace, which means it'll take me 12 hours to go 24 miles. And since I didn't leave camp till 7:15 a.m., it was too cold to get up out of the car before that, well, that'll put me at Resting Springs at like 7 p.m. Oh. I mean, I did run a marathon once, and that's 26.2 miles, and that took me 4 hours and 44 minutes, but this is no marathon. This hike is all about the journey. Wow, look, this is kind of cool. It's a road sign folded in half, but looks like there's just like a little bolt stuck through it. And when you fold it up, it says flooded. It's wild to think of a lonely desert highway in a very dry part of the desert right outside Death Valley ever being flooded. But I guess when they have these summer monsoon rains and oh gosh, water probably comes cascading down these mountains, and oh well, I believe it. There's kind of a dip in the road back there, and I'll bet it sees a big old puddle whenever there's one of those summer rainstorms. Now, there's no cell phone signal for a lot of this route, so you might be wondering how exactly I'm gonna get a hold of my sister to let her know it's time to pick me up at Resting Spring. Well, I tried to estimate my pace, and so I let her know roughly what time I should be there. And there are spots along the road where I do have signal, and so I've been keeping her posted on my progress. But I also brought my satellite phone. So worst case scenario, I can text her on the old Garmin InReach and let her know. Well, I'll probably do that when I'm about 2 miles from Resting Spring, because that'll give her about, enough time to get herself together, get in the car, and drive down there to pick me up. So yeah, I'm carrying my satellite phone. Actually, I weighed my pack, and it's 20 pounds for a 1-day trip. I wanted to make sure I brought plenty of water, so, well, in addition to my satellite phone, I'm also carrying 4 liters of water and, well, a bunch of other stuff. Matter of fact, it's about time to take a break. I've gone about almost 8 miles. That's a third of the trip. I'd say it's time for brunch. Let me find a nice spot in the desert to sit down for a minute, and I'll show you everything I'm carrying with me. See if I can find a nice place to sit down off this Jeep track here. Okay, so here's everything I'm carrying in my 20-pound pack. This is my cell phone wallet case, which I'm using the phone to shoot the video, but this has my ID in it and credit cards, just in case, you never know. Sunblock, if I get hot enough to take off this jacket. My Garmin InReach to call my sister. Some toilet paper and a trenching tool and a plastic bag in case I have to go number 2. Then I got a headlamp for if I'm still on the trail after dark. And then on that Mylar balloon I picked up, I have a pair of gloves because it was real cold this morning, and a t-shirt in case it gets real hot this afternoon. Then in this middle row here, we have my drone. I've got an extra tripod. I've got some external battery packs to keep my cell phone going throughout the day. I even brought a second backup cell phone. And then this is a extra microphone and audio equipment. And then the top row is water. There's 2 liters there, plus I have another 2-liter bladder in my pack. That was my coffee mug for my coffee this morning. And then I brought 4 packets of beef jerky, 3 apples, a little bag of cola gummies, some trail mix, some fruit leather, a couple little snack bars, and some fruit snacks. Fruit snacks. I think it's time for breakfast. Okay. Back on the trail. Man, I gotta drink some of this water. Actually, it's ironic that I'm complaining about this water weight, because if I was on the old Spanish Trail back in those days, I would have been happy to be carrying this much water. Uh-oh, I'm approaching the mountains. Well, lucky for me, Caltrans has very thoughtfully paved a route right over this pass, which is called Emigrant Pass, very aptly named. But it wouldn't have been paved back in the days of the old Spanish Trail, and I can't imagine how these travelers handled it. I mean, I'm about 17 miles in now, and I'm wiped out. And if I had to climb a mountain pass right now, just to get to my campsite for the night, I'm not sure I could do it. Now, I suppose by this point in the journey, travelers on the old Spanish Trail had been doing it enough days in a row to where they were sort of conditioned, in shape for it. Well, I guess I'm out of shape, because I am beat. But I'm not giving up. I gotta make it to Resting Springs by sundown. Tacoma Valley! I made it over Emigrant Pass. And I didn't even end up taking the paved road because there was like a Jeep trail off to the side, and honestly, well, it seemed safer because of the way that hairpin turn goes. Wow, look at this campsite up here. That would be a pretty cool place to camp. Looking out over the Mesquite Valley and the Kingston Mountains. And of course, Emigrant Pass. That'll have to wait for another day though, because with any luck, I won't be camping tonight. I'll be sleeping in my cozy, comfy bed. Resting Springs is just around that bend there, down in the valley, about 6 more miles away. I think I can make that. Can you imagine being that bus driver having to navigate that school bus over this squirrely pass twice a day? And I think it's all just for one kid. The Death Valley School is in Shoshone. And so kids from all over this area go to that school, from Furnace Creek and Shoshone and Tacoma. And I think there's one kid who lives back there in Charleston View. And that bus driver has to go all the way from Shoshone to Charleston View twice a day to bring that kid to and from school. Look at that. I've officially been hiking from sunup to sundown. I have 3 more miles to go to Resting Springs. And oh my gosh, these are gonna be the 3 hardest miles I've ever walked in my life. My legs are super sore. My feet are killing me. And my shoulders don't feel too good either. I can't imagine having to camp out after a day's hike like that, which is exactly what these people used to do on the old Spanish Trail. Day after day after day. Okay, not every day was 24 miles, but, well, you get the idea. Those people were tough. And if this hike has taught me anything, it's a massive respect for people back then. Because think about it. Even after Spain signed that Treaty of Guadalupe de Hidalgo and gave all the land to the U.S. and the Spanish quit using the trail, well, then the Mormons started using it. You know, settlers with wagons and families. Can you imagine being a little kid having to do this stretch on this trail? Woo-wee! People back then were tough. But I'm pretty tough myself, and I think I can push through these last 3 miles. I can actually see Resting Springs up ahead. It's pretty dark, so you guys probably can't see it, but there's a bunch of trees and greenery, and I'm pretty excited to see it. But imagine how much more excited I would be to see it if I'd been traveling all day without any water. And that was the only water I had to look forward to. Remember, back at the last spring, it was kind of hit or miss. Agua escarbada, they had to dig for it. It was muddy, there wasn't much of it. So realistically, people camping back there probably didn't get to drink as much water as they wanted. So I would be really excited to see this little oasis up ahead. More excited even than I am now. Ooh, it's getting really dark now. And you know what that means. On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, warm smell of my sister rising up through the air. And up ahead in the distance, I see a glimmering light. Is it my sister's forerunner? Will I get a hot shower tonight? Just kidding. She's not quite here yet because I still have about a mile and a half to go. Better stop singing and keep moving. Oh my God, I made it! Resting Springs at last! But my sister's nowhere in sight. I think I actually do have cell signal here. So I better call her, because if there's anything I'm more excited to see than Resting Springs, it'll be my sister's forerunner. Yay, my sister's here. I knew she wouldn't forget about me. Oh my God, this hot shower feels amazing. Again, I can't imagine being a traveler on the old Spanish Trail and having nothing more to look forward to than a rocky campsite at Resting Spring, which, by the way, is kind of a bummer that I wasn't able to go to the exact Resting Spring because it's on private property, A, and B, well, it would have been too dark to see anything anyways. But to be honest, well, it's kind of a blessing in disguise, because to get to the actual spring, I probably would have had to walk like an extra quarter of a mile, and I don't think I could have taken that. Oh, I've never been this tired. I'm just gonna enjoy this hot shower and go to bed and dream about all those tough pioneers who used to do the whole Spanish Trail from Santa Fe to Los Angeles. You guys have my respect.